Hey, team players, welcome to Local Football Flavor. We've given you a lot of mock drafts over the last couple of weeks, and today we're going to break down some specific player comparisons over the next couple of episodes. And in this particular episode, we're going to hit with one that's happening right in the first round, Bob, and it's between Robinson, running back Atlanta, and Eckler, running back Chargers. And Bob, we're bringing this up because there's a lot of these two guys going in opposite directions. Eckler looks like he's tumbling and falling out of favor, and Robinson seems like he's the new flavor of the week. So, as Mr. Texas himself, why don't you break down the virtues that Robinson shows you on tape and what it is that you like about him?
Well, there's just a lot to like about Bijan. Bijan has elite athleticism. He is great running between the tackles. He can catch passes. He can get downfield. I mean, I was looking at a stat today that said there hasn't been a lot of players ranked in the next gen stats at like a 99, and Bijan is one of them. And when you look at running backs that have come out and have been drafted in the first round in recent memory, most of them have been pretty stellar in terms of fantasy production. I mean, that's even considering
Najee's injury last year.
Yeah, and that's even considering Leonard Fournette amongst that group. So you look at Saquon, Leonard Fournette, Bijan, and this year you have Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs, who there's a good chance that both of them are going to be fairly productive. But it's not just Bijan's athleticism and general skill that sets him apart as a rookie running back. It's also the system that he's going to. We know that Atlanta's strength last year was running the ball. And we know that Atlanta probably could have got a lot more wins if they would have stepped away from that for a little bit and threw the ball a little bit more downfield, and make it more balanced. But we know that's not the case for Atlanta, and we know that Atlanta is going to keep toting the rock. And it's most likely that Atlanta is probably going to give Bijan at least 20 to 25 opportunities a game to run the ball. And that's not even considering what's the opportunities he's going to have as a pass catcher. So when it comes down to it, you see Bijan as being the pure runner out of these two.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Eckler, on the other hand, and one of the things and one of the knocks on Eckler that I gave when we were doing our just year in review is that Eckler has games where he's not really running the ball, where, he'll have games where it's like 142 yards, then he'll have a game with 30 yards. What saves Eckler a lot, at least last year and in seasons past, was his ability to catch the ball. I'm just going to throw a stat at you to make sure that this is very clear. In 2021, Eckler had another great season. He had 911 yards rushing. Didn't even eclipse 1,000. 70 receptions on 94 targets. He had 8 receiving touchdowns, 12 rushing touchdowns. Okay?
20 touchdowns solid.
The year after 2022, he had 204 attempts, which is the same attempts as he had almost the same as the previous year. The same number of rushing yards, 915. So,
that's what he is.
There, almost the same average per carry. But he had more receptions at 107 out of 127 targets.
And how much of an increase was that again, Bob?
That is an increase of 37 receptions. However,
that's a lot.
That did not translate to a bigger yardage output. He only went for 647 in the year that he had 70, and then 722 in the year that he had 107. So, and he had less receiving touchdowns last year than he did the previous season. So we've been talking a lot about injuries to Keenan Allen, injuries to Mike Williams, and that is going to play a role in what Austin Ekeler is going to do this year. But the one thing as a drafter that I would be really wary about is rookie production is rookie production. We could get a really phenomenal season out of Bijan Robinson, and we probably are going to get a really phenomenal season out of Bijan Robinson. But we know what Eckler can and cannot do. And we can even trace this back to 2020. This is a year that he got hurt. He only played 10 games. He started all 10 of them. He went for 530 yards rushing, 1 touchdown, and 65 targets, so 54 receptions and 2 touchdowns before he went down. So if you were to project that forward, you're seeing a lot of that yardage, but maybe not as much of the touchdowns. Prior to that year, before he was the starter, he played in 8 games as the starter, 557 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns, 92 receptions, 8 touchdowns. So his value is all in that passing game. And we know that they're going to pass the ball. That is something that they do, and it's something that they do very well. The only knock on Eckler is that where are those targets? Are those targets going to go away from last year? Are we going to return to a 2020? Is it going to go backwards even more? But I think knowing what we know about Austin Ekeler, it would be unfair. I saw him the other day drop all the way down to 8 or 9 in mock drafts. And I think that that's an absolute crazy position to have Austin Ekeler in, because we know what we're getting. Yes, we're not getting a 1,000-yard rusher. We probably won't ever get a 1,000-yard rusher out of Austin Ekeler. But as long as the targets are there, and as long as the receptions are there, and like I said, those targets, 127, 94, 65, 108, 53, 35, that's his career targets. They're good. They're throwing him the ball. And yes, I hate that he's not like your pure natural RB1, because he feels a lot more like, who's the guy from New England? Was it Kevin White?
It was White something. Maybe it was Zamir White, but it was definitely White.
Who got, basically you drafted him in like the 7th round, and he got all the receptions for the during those Brady years for New England as the running back, and it was amazing. But you didn't see him on the field when it really mattered, and so I would get a big concern with Austin Ekeler is if Quentin Johnston is who we think he is, if Mike Williams comes back healthy, and if Keenan Allen comes back healthy, and then you also have the tight end there, Gerald Everett.
Yeah, Everett, yeah.
The targets may or may not be there, but if they're passing it to somebody else, maybe that equates to more goal line carries for him, which could be really good. But there's a lot less concern about Bijan Robinson's position in the game plan. But he does have a talented backup that's chomping at the bit to get back into the starting role. And so what do you want to go with as a fantasy player? And for me, I'm more likely, if I have the choice between Eckler and Robinson, to choose Eckler, because I know he can produce running back 1 numbers in fantasy football. I don't know yet if Bijan can.
See, and here's my counter argument against that. Eckler was so dependent upon touchdowns last year. The catching, yes, obviously that was a big component of it. But when he did not get in the end zone, his numbers were weak. Now, granted, it didn't happen a lot. He scored a hell of a lot of touchdowns. But this all comes back to the injury to Allen and Williams. When Allen goes out in particularly, they don't have a short yardage guy they can trust. I go all the way back to, I believe it was either week 3 or 4, Thursday night game in Kansas City. It's the game where Allen went down.
Week 2.
Week 2, okay. Everett is wide open in the end zone and made the wrong cut. Herbert threw a pick 6 that went like 104 yards. And from that moment on, Everett was an afterthought. And from that moment on, Eckler got all of the short yardage touches. My concern is the 2 healthy receivers, you end up having a situation where it's, hey, let's give them the ball because we know they can catch the ball and they'll be out there. But the other thing with Eckler that is kind of being forgotten to the entire league community is he's really fighting to get another contract. And the Chargers ain't going to give it to him. And there is dissension amongst the ranks in there. And it is something for the production that Eckler has done he's going to be career paid in this era of 5 years of running back. He's going to be below the 50th guy paid who plays running back.
Well,
and it is really like something that's a problem out there. And the reason I bring the off the field issue up is that can translate to I'm being a free agent next year. And the more tread I have on the tires, the better. And when it comes time to I have a knick-knack injury, yeah, maybe I already put up a good enough 6 games that teams will know what I am when I come back. And to me, that's a giant red flag, knowing how touchdown dependent he is and giant incentive not to fully participate. Give me the rookie who needs to prove himself, has the talent to do so. And by the way, the coach who made Henry. That's what I want.
So like I said, going back to Eckler, and I'm saying that he has bust games and boom games. Within the span of 3 weeks, Eckler had a game where he rushed 4 times for 5 yards and 16 times for 173 yards. And in the game, and this is just to kind of put a position out there, this game was against Cleveland. Cleveland didn't have the best rushing game.
Who didn't run on Cleveland?
However, he also was still in the passing game for 4 targets, 4 catches.
Mm-hmm.
Then you step it up and you go to a game where he had, against Arizona, he rushed 5 times for 20 yards, but he had 11 receptions for 60. In a game against San Francisco, 6 rushes for 24 yards, 7 receptions for 30. You come back down towards the end of the year, he's rushing for 15, 12, 18, 10, 11. He's never, or at least last year, let's go back to 2021 here, he has never rushed for more than 20 times in a game. The highest is 19. And so he has to be absolutely efficient. And the efficiency numbers are really, really weird because those rushes against Arizona that I said, 5 times, his average was 4. You would look at it and you say, that's phenomenal. But then you look at how many carries he had and you're like, 5? Mm-hmm. Well, of course you can be efficient with 5 carries. You hope that somebody could be efficient. And it really didn't always equate when you look at the season. It didn't always equate because he's not rushing more, he gets more receptions. That's not the case. It's the game flow kind of perspective. But there's nobody really backing him up. I mean,
that's true.
We've seen Zach Horvath. We've seen Isaiah Spiller. We've seen guys come in to be the guy, I guess, to take over for Eckler, and they don't do anything. And it's not
one of the mysteries of the draft.
It's not worth owning them in fantasy. And so, like, this is the dichotomy that you have between Bijan and Eckler, is that Bijan's talent, Bijan's situation is better because he's going to run the ball more. But what we need to think about with Bijan Robinson, which is the same kind of knock that I would have with the Chargers, is game script. Austin Ekeler is always part of game script, it feels. There's not really a time, even though he might, fade back a little bit, you're never like, oh, it's the 4th quarter, they're up by 30, Eckler's out of the game. They're never up by 30, first of all. And so
defense is too bad.
You have to consider that. And one of the things that we talk about with Atlanta is that Ritter, we like him. I like him at least.
You like him.
A lot of people like him. But we don't know what the game script is going to be. If Bijan's running the ball 20 times and it doesn't equate to any points, then you could be getting into a situation where maybe Tyler Algier might be a better option at certain points in the game.
I suspect that game plan in Atlanta is Bijan gets the ball 20 to 25 times. Algier still gets it 10 to 13 times.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then they only throw the ball less than 20. I suspect that's what they're going for, which
that's gonna hit into those PPR numbers. So if Ritter's only throwing the ball 20 times a game, then there's a lot of upside from the rushing perspective for Bijan, but there's not a lot of upside in the PPR perspective for Bijan. Even though he has the talent to do it, if Ritter's throwing the ball 20 times a game and we think that Pitts is going to get 8 targets and we think that London's going to get 8 targets. Well, then that's only 4 more targets to go around between Tyler Algier, Bijan Robinson, and Matt Collins. And so in a PPR league, I would tend to sway more towards Eckler. In a standard league, I think Bijan's probably your guy that's probably going to go up there hand in hand with Christian McCaffrey for number 1 running back being drafted, just because the situation would equate better for a standard league than it would to a PPR league. And that's one of the reasons I would put Eckler ahead. Even in a half PPR league, I have Eckler slightly ahead. But in a standard league, Eckler, I don't even have Eckler in the top 5 in a standard league, to be honest with you.
Well, the one thing in Bijan's case to defend him in the PPR realm is that the tight end situation in Atlanta is not traditional. Pitts is a much more of a vertical threat than the vast majority of tight ends before him. He's really a wide receiver. So when you're looking for your check down over the middle, it's more likely to be checking down to a running back. And one of the things in his profile coming out was Bijan has amazing hands. Him and Gibbs both. So when you look at that, does that translate to be potentially a just stronger, faster, more athletic version of Eckler in what admittedly will be a lower scoring system, but it's going to be lower scoring by design. I think both of them, when we're said and done, looking at their teams overall, I think they're both going to be the 8 seeds next year. The team that was just one out looking in. And I think that there's a very real chance of that. And when you're looking at that, the one who's more integral to his team during a playoff push and the real life playoff push is without a doubt Bijan. Because you take Bijan off of that team, they don't have an offense. You take Eckler off of that team, Herbert can still throw it 80 times and not have an issue.
Yeah, but that's the other point to mention for Eckler is that Herbie's throwing the ball. As long as Herbie's throwing the ball, those PPR opportunities are going to be there. As I said with Eckler, Eckler is not a first or second round guy in a standard league, in my opinion. If you are just basing it off of the potential for touchdowns, I think he's going to get less touchdowns than he got last year. If you're okay with that and you're willing to roll the dice with that, I think that's fine. I think the yardage is going to be good for him, and I think the PPR points put him ahead of a lot of other running backs that we're going to talk about over the course of the next couple of days. But in my mind, PPR, I'm taking Eckler, and I'm taking Eckler anywhere from the 4 to the 8 if he's available. And for Bijan, if Eckler's not there, I'm taking him. He's from 5 to 9 for me. I don't think he's going to fall anywhere past 9. If he falls anywhere past 9, then there's something wrong with your league, to be honest with you.
So I am so high on Bijan, I would take him second after McCaffrey. I'm a genuinely admitted a giant running back guy. To me, Bijan, even in a PPR format, gives me so much more upside because of the dependency that his team needs him. The fact that, A, the line is better and the game script is never going to phase him out. I think that is going to be the edge there about why I would take Bijan as the second running back off the board all day, every day.
Yeah, and for me, it would go Christian McCaffrey, Eckler, Bijan. And I think whether you take Bijan or Eckler, I think you're going to be in a very good position in your league because you're drafting between the 4 and the 8 picks, basically. The question is, would you be bold enough to take Bijan over, let's say, Justin Jefferson?
Yes.
Or, say, Jamar Chase?
Definitely. Once you said yes to Jefferson, it's yes to everyone else too. That's how I roll, at least.
And that's the decision that a lot of owners are thinking about going into this, draft season. Is I have the 1, 2, 3 pick. I'm going to have to pass on really talented players to take Bijan if I want him on my team, or I'm going to have to concoct a trade later on after the draft to get Bijan, which is going to cost a lot anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, you've got to, if you want Bijan and you are drafting in that 1, 2, 3 spot, it's not unheard of to take him, but get ready for some ribs if you take him over Justin Jefferson, because everybody's having him as basically the clear-cut #1 wide receiver, clear-cut fantasy player. May not be as clear-cut as people might think, though.
And that's well said, Bob. So, team players, for tomorrow's episode of the Player Breakdown, we're going to be addressing 2 pass catchers that people are concerned about because of their situation. One is old and one has a horrible quarterback, but both might be available on the turn in your draft.